Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome on our expert talk, our online session on the front end of innovation. Today, I'm super happy to be here with you. And front end of innovation is all about exploration, guiding trends, searching for weak signals, checking insights, building scenarios, creating a future thinking, creating a common understanding of the future, and going into innovation and strategy. And I thought about who could be a good guest for this expert talk session. And of course, immediately came to my mind Professor Rene Rohrbeck from EDHEC Business School, France. So I'm super happy to be here with you, Rene, this morning and to have you as my guest in the online session. Good morning, Rene. Let's shake a virtual hands. You're in your virtual studio in France. In corporate foresight since more than 10 years, researching on corporate foresight and the impact and the positive impacts on corporate performance, but you came to different insights on how corporate foresight works in firms to make them more innovative and more successful. So maybe you can explain a little bit about these results.
Foresight and firm performance, or in other words, we realize that firms which on average do much more foresight have a much worse performance than the others. And of course, as a foresighter, you say, well, that can't be right. So what's going on here is actually you're measuring a completely different effect. You're measuring the effect that if you're having a good performance, then you don't care much about foresight. And you can probably feel that also on a personal level. Let's say you're a manager in the automobile industry 10 years ago, and you have healthy profits and have a good salary at the end of the year. There's a big bonus check coming your way. It's not the moment when you ask the what if questions. What if the industry would be changing? What if jobs would be automated much more? What would be then important for me to do? So this effect is sort of confounding the effect of foresight, which could be then much more positive. So what we did recently is to say, why don't we take a very long time frame, and we took here a delay of 7 years, and then correlated foresight capability measured with our maturity model, and then firm performance. And this is when we discovered, in fact, these very strong effects which you see displayed here. So it's an incredible effect on growth. It's a very good effect on profitability, and the effect on your likelihood of outperforming the peers in your industry also comes out as very strong. So this is much more encouraging.
You see in the middle, but they have a very low innovation readiness. So just 1 of 4, or what you say, 1 of 5 companies feel that they have a very low innovation readiness. So how do these findings fit together? I mean, this correlates very much with your research, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think when you look at this slide, of course, you see this paradox, right? You're saying I'm spending more and more money, but still, as an organization, I don't feel that I'm ready to bring all these innovations to market. And I've worked in a large organization. Maybe many in the audience have been working for a large organization, and in a large organization, it doesn't feel so odd, actually. You need to be able to answer 3 questions with yes, and these are hard questions. The first question is, am I able to see trends ahead of competitors? Am I able to get this lead time advantage? The second question is, am I able to create in my organization the understanding that we could be this very different company with these very different products, with these very different services or even business models? This is something which is often very difficult to say yes to in a large organization. And then the third question comes, which is, well, even if we as an organization somewhere or across the organization feel that we can go after this innovation opportunity, are we able to then legitimize action? And that is where your shareholders come in, your stakeholders come in. And when you go through these 3 questions, then many organizations need to say at least to 1, if not for 2 or 3, no.
I think all 3 steps are quite difficult. First, the exploration part, the seeing because this is a lot to do with cross-industry. You have to invest resources that just explore the future, not only in your industry, but also cross-industry. So this is for a lot of people in organizations, if you're like a mobility company, why should you explore health? Why should you explore like aviation? And this is so difficult to understand, but it's so important in exploring to see the future on a holistic scope. This is difficult to understand. Then the second step, what you said, to create a common belief, to create a common picture of the future with all relevant stakeholders in the organization. I think this is super difficult because there are so strong top managers. If you take like a huge corporations with 100,000 employees, they are so strong top managers since 20 years in this organization, and they are like maybe having an engineer background or a top management background. So for them, it's very strong to change their mind, and they are also very alpha sometimes. I think the creating a common belief, super difficult. And then to bring it to action means that corporate foresight needs to cooperate with the business units and bring the action in the business units and also have a good relation with the business unit, because sometimes corporate foresight is just like, oh, they are sitting in their Elfenbein tower and what are they doing there? They are just wasting money. We are here in the business units. We bring the profit. So also very difficult, all three steps. But I think the most important thing is to create a common belief, to create a common understanding how might the future look like for our company. How can you do this? Do you have any examples or experiences with this? I was asking, how can you create like a common belief of the future in the company? How can you really make the management and all the stakeholders think about like a common picture of the future? Do you have any kind of example for this?
Right. So I think from many organizations we have seen that it's very hard, but there's a lot of examples out there of firms who have made that transition. But if you want to picture a little bit the difficulty of how to do that and what would that entail, I often say, just imagine yourself after a long day in your corporate office. You're driving home in your car and you believe that, for my family, it might be actually much better to leave this corporate world behind with this hectic lifestyle. And maybe I'm just going to be a diving instructor in Egypt. And while you're driving, you get so much worked up with this that at home, you're really saying, look, my dear spouse, there's really two worlds here. One could be the world as we know it, but then there's this other world. Maybe we're a bit poorer, but maybe it's much better for our organization as a family and how we run our lives. And I don't know how it would be when you get home, but when I get home, probably my wife asks the first question, well, but how do we find an international school there? And how would we deal maybe if we can't travel like we can't travel now, etc., etc. And this is when you realize that when you want to really create this future picture of your organization, you need to bring in all the relevant stakeholders internally, and you need to give them time to co-construct with you this new lifestyle. Then the ideas come in and say, yeah, indeed, we would have much more time. We would see each other much more. We would have maybe a little bit less money, but maybe a lot more quality time as a family. And maybe it is then the switch you want to make.
So you take your time to get a buy-in from all of them, to build a platform, talking about the future, talking about imagination, how it's maybe it's the ability to imagine the company in 5 to 10 years. And you need time to do this. You have to involve the people. But it's my question, it's not a one-time thing. I mean, should be like a permanent process. What I'm drawing here, and I like very much, is this endless circle of scanning, scouting, exploration, validating, and especially in the VUCA world now, the things change so fast that you cannot do this strategy building once. You need to do it like permanently more often, because this front end exploring, evaluate, always finds new signals, new disruptors, new players from Tel Aviv, from China, from US. And so you have to do this more regularly, more often, and then put it somehow into like an innovation funnel. I know this is not the optimal innovation funnel, and I also don't want to say that innovation funnel is a perfect solution, but I mean it has to do something with creativity, ideation, feasibility concept, prototyping, testing, execution, production, launch. But what do you say about this permanent exploration and this funnel of creating something new?
So in principle, what we see now is a huge shift in the way we do innovation, because in many markets, you either need to go big or you go out. So you need, as an organization, choose much more carefully in which basket you lay all your eggs. And for that, of course, foresight can help a lot. But the way we visualize it today is with our maturity model, which is organized around 3 phases. In the first phase, you really scout broadly, and you scout with tools which put you ahead of the curve. So many who want to understand what's going on in innovation, they're still opening up a Google search, right? And then they say, well, maybe I'm going to read the MIT magazine, etc. And that is today not good enough. You need to have early warning signals, and there's great tools out there which allow you to do that, not just on the basis of published things, but also things in personal blogs of researchers, etc. So you're fighting for this lead time. In the second phase, you're fighting for connecting different planes of thought. So new technologies, new customer needs, also needs of future customers which can't not even tell you what they need in the future. So you also need creativity to come in to then prospect this new future. And then there's a third phase, and this is about this constant experimentation. Even if you're already 99% sure that you want to lay all your eggs in this basket, make sure that you try out whether there is then really demand coming up, whether there's really early good feedback that this technological feasibility will be there, that also the financial viability will be there. And this is something which for many firms who have grown up in a stage gate model is very hard to perceive. But you know, again, the stage gate model and this funnel comes from the 80s, when innovation was mostly driven by what we in Germany have a fantastic word for, the betriebliche Vorschlagswesen.
Right.
So this is this idea that, you know, everyone can come up with ideas, and then empirical study shows that from 3,000 ideas, you only have one success. But this is really not the world anymore today. You need to identify early where there's a lot of value to be had, and then you iterate through these 3 Ps continuously until you have the success there.
I mean, a small excursus. We are now in Corona times, and this all sounds very time intensive. So this perceiving, prospecting, probing costs a lot of resources, budget, and does not immediately lead to return on investment. Maybe in 5 to 10 years, maybe if you are lucky in 3 years, but not now. So now is Corona, and the companies say, no, we have more important things to do. You know, the CEO says, no, we have to concentrate on our core business, on operations. We need to secure our workers. We have so much to do with digital workplace and allocating our budgets. Maybe they are limited now because our sales decreased and so on. So they have so much more to do now. But what should they do now? Should they continue like the permanent way? Should exploring and innovation be like a permanent process? Doesn't matter how the company's success is at the moment. Is it like anti-cyclical, or is it like just permanent?
Well, what we will see, and that's reality, is that we need to focus more. And I think there's 2 things which really stick out for me, what good firms do today. The first is that while they downsize potentially their innovation budgets, they create focus. They really look into what is then the value which I want to capture, and how do I make sure that this value gets captured while I'm using also this opportunity potentially to downsize more on sort of line extension type of innovation. And the other thing which we see coming up strongly is this what we either call open strategy or open innovation, or industry innovation where different partners now come together and say, well, if we want to create this innovation, we can't go alone anymore. And this is actually a good thing because then you are in a different mindset, you create a new ecosystem, and that often is much more stable than this lone company going in and trying to protect its market.
The first thing where you say that we have to focus more. This is like a natural behavior when you have less budget, less resources. You focus, and you tailor. You don't have a broad scope, maybe, because usually in innovation and exploration you should have a broad scope, also cross industry. Maybe you narrow your scope a little bit. But what they also do is they narrow their time horizon at the moment, so they don't look. They just look 6 months maybe in innovation. So it's more than it's more like active digitalization, and I wouldn't call this disruptive innovation. So they are on horizon 1, not on horizon 2, and never on horizon 3. And this is a big problem at the moment. I think that the corporates losing their time horizon to really find disruptive models for the future, like autonomous driving, like new forms of energy. And this thing, they narrow their scope and their time horizon. That's a problem. Maybe the time horizon is the biggest problem. And open innovation, the problem is at the moment that you cannot collaborate with all your startups and partners because they are down in their business. They are on operations and they say, no, let's talk 6 months later because at the moment we have more important things to do. I think this could be a problem in the open innovation ecosystem because this is sometimes also a global thing and you have to rely on your US partners, on your China outpost and so on. So this could be also a problem that the companies from the ecosystem are down at the moment. But you have a very nice example, a success story.
Yeah, I just wanted to bring this one in because I'm also passionate about cycling. I haven't achieved enough revenues in my academic business to offer myself a nice Bosch one. But this is a very interesting case for me because it started way back when nobody was talking about electric bicycles, when they realized, and this was this typical garage story where you say, well, there's actually just a couple of engineers who are enthusiastic about it and said, I mean, it's too obvious with all the know-how we have on the technical solution side, we must be able to be an interesting player in this market of electric bikes. And this is something where you need then to bring this different mindsets together. And in this case, legend has it that they have actually built a full prototype and showed it to the CEO and say, look, we don't want you just to see it, we want you to ride on it, to experience it. When you then create this mind share, which we were talking about earlier, with these scenarios that you say across the organization, we suddenly realize there must be huge potential. And the end of the story is a very good one here. Now the e-bike market is about a $20 billion market globally. And Bosch is really firmly placed in this high-end segment there. And they made a huge success story out of it. But these sort of innovation initiatives, they're often very fragile plans. So you early on need to create this shared understanding of where you're heading with this.
I think especially now they are very happy that they are in the business because during Corona, I think they have like doubled the number of sold e-bikes. When you want to buy an e-bike now, it's very difficult to get a good one, I believe, because they're all sold out. Everybody wants to have like individual cheap mobility, also wants to do some sports because during Corona, usually you sit too much, you don't travel so much, you eat too much, drink too much wine. So the people need to do sports and they buy e-bikes. At the moment, it's really rocket sales, I think. And I know this from some clients. The e-bike really sales is very great at the moment. Everything for individual mobility because the people don't like the public transport at the moment. So they buy small motorbikes. And yeah, cheap individual mobility is a good thing at the moment. So very nice story from Bosch. I really believe that they are happy to be in the market at the moment. I want to just explore what is the front end of innovation. And because front end of innovation sounds a bit abstract and it's different to understand, but I think there are some puzzle pieces in the front end. And one, of course, is trend research, consumer insight, exploring weak signals, which are small signs of change, building trend radars like orientation tool to get trends in different time horizons, and getting innovation fields out of the radars to connecting the dots, read between the dots, understand own corporate abilities, how they match with the future, and build innovation fields. Also scenario thinking, because radars, I know this also from your charts, Rene, radars can play an important role to build scenarios because they're a good input. We call it sometimes picture of the future, so there might be not so many different scenarios, but one, what you also said, like management picture of the future, yeah, creating ideation, future storytelling, also road mapping and business modeling could be part of this foresight and front end process. And I have some very nice tools here. For example, a trend radar, how you can manage your trends. You see like 3 different layers of act, prepare, watch, think. These are layers how you can organize your trends in different segments, and it brings you, I mean, a trend radar just brings you in the organization perfect visibility, because everybody understands, people can contribute in the voting, they are involved, they evaluate trends together, they get a common understanding of trends, they can bring in new trends, they get orientation. And I don't know if this works, if we can switch to like an online tool of trend management, but if this works, we can show it later. In the end, you will see a QR code where you can check out like online tools for trend management, which are very, very nice. And yeah, you can use trend radars to build company success. This is a very new example from BMW. They use different sources, of course, for their strategy and innovation building, but tech radars and trend radars are one source. And what they saw is circular economy as a really urgent topic. And of course, they have worked in sustainability since long time, but circular economy now, since 2020, is a top-down CEO strategic topic for all business units, including procurement, engineering, production, design. Everybody has to work on circular things to make the BMW really 100% circular in the future. So this is a nice example how to find new action fields and bring them in as strategic topics. And also this can sometimes be totally cross-industry. Like here we see an example of Merck, pharma company from Darmstadt, a very, very nice, innovative company, really disrupting and going into new business. And what they saw is this additive manufacturing in 2016. What is 3D printing? What does this mean to do with pharma? I mean, you don't see immediate correlations and connections, but they thought there should be something in for us. And we could maybe create like personalized medicine. We can maybe change our production processes with additive manufacturing in pharma and so on. And in 2016, they came out with the idea to use additive manufacturing to create the next level of pharma production, which can be more decentralized, smaller machines, and print tablets for pharma. So it's called AMT, additive manufacturing for therapeutics and tablets. Very nice. Now you have a much shorter cycle also for testing, klinische Vorstudien, and yeah, maybe in the future it will change the whole supply chain. So good cross-industry example. Actually, Rene, we talked about scenario building. So maybe we should deeper go into scenarios and use scenarios to create more motivation. Can you explore a little bit more on scenario building, maybe?
Right. I think scenario planning is often perceived as this boring analytic process, very lengthy and so on. But this is really not how it needs to be. What we need to have, and this is what we emphasize a lot in the projects we do, is that we need to have very short and very intensive interactions around building scenarios, and that with many people. So often in our scenario projects, we would involve 200 or more people in the construction process, but not through lengthy workshops, but through very short sessions, which today we even do online, which we call sprints, where you sprint towards having an understanding of what's driving the uncertainty in your environment, a sprint where you build scenarios, a sprint where you interpret what that means then for my business, etc. So this is, I think, where we're going to see a lot of progress also in the corporate strategic discussion and joint innovation activity to make this much more fluid and much more nice to attend, and then also much more efficient to come up with these inspiring future visions on how you can develop your business.
It also gives you kind of a feeling of safety and more preparedness when you do this more permanent, because I remember in the past it was like every 5 years we should build a new scenario, every 10 years, and in the meantime you were like sitting there, is this the right way? But now if you do it more fluent, more dynamic, more permanent process, and also not so complex maybe, yeah? Because this scenario building can be very boring, very empirical. But if you do it more in an inspiring, dynamic, fluid way, it can give you a better understanding, permanent, and give you also more safety for business activities, right?
Yeah, and one thing which is maybe not so obvious is that when you work with scenarios, you can actually create an incredible strategic agility. Because when you think about it, oftentimes now we're in these linear strategic development processes, which also take a lot of time, but they're already starting with a hypothesis. And then they take maybe a couple of months to execute, and then you take the far-reaching decision. But when you work with scenarios, then these scenarios, they don't need to be changed every time you have a new strategic challenge. So once you have built these scenarios, you have a common frame of reference for everyone who will be involved in strategy making. And you can then also use that to wind tunnel current strategies, wind tunnel new strategic initiatives which are being proposed. And that gives you then not only a feeling of which one is the one I should choose now, but you have also already pre-thought what would need to happen if this strategy is not playing out.
Like wargaming pre-thought. That's like wargaming.
Right.
Yeah, you are very prepared then. Hey, Rene, it's so nice to meet you here in the virtual studio. In our dry run, you said, why should we do this? It's better to have like a Zoom window. I don't see so much advantages, but for me, it's really more engaging, more interactive. Before I give the question to the audience, and the audience, the chance to ask some questions to you, because you're really a big expert in the field. And I would like to ask you my last question. Where do you see the future of foresight heading? The future of the front end of innovation? Does it has to do more with artificial intelligence and big data, as everybody would like naturally say? Or what is your perspective on the future of foresight in the next 5 to 10 years, let's say?
True. I mean, I think what we discussed on the innovation funnel is something which we'll see also will shape the way we do foresight and innovation in the years to come. I think what we can do now is validate innovative ideas much earlier. Concepts can be validated in real time because you can use your scanning tools to directly identify whether that is the description of my idea, who else has a description of their startup, of their research project, which is very similar. And machines do that for you so that you can do that globally and across many different sources. So that means that it's much easier for us today to find the delta, or find where the new planes of thought can connect to create something really new and really interesting. And what we also see is that many firms, they're now quite systematic in building foresight into the existing processes, the yearly annual review cycle, the strategic planning cycle, innovation portfolio management. And that's certainly a trend which will just accelerate. And I think thirdly, I mean, we discussed this already a bit. What I believe in a lot is this scenario-based strategizing and planning. It doesn't need to be just about the strategy. The same thing applies also for markets. When you think about how could this market develop and what kind of products, business models, and services does then the market need in its different futures. This is something which will become a much more common thing to do in design thinking processes and innovation processes, etc. And we see that already happening around us.
So could we agree on, in this fast changing world of hyper competition, of really global competition, with now China as a main dominant innovation player in the world, Silicon Valley, and all these new players, foresight should be like a really core aspect of the business process? It should not be like in a lab somewhere. It should not be like in a corporate Elfenbeinturm. Foresight should be in the core process of the business, of the strategy, of all what the business units do. So it's like an organic part of doing business is doing foresight as well. And because we have so much great tools, I mean, it's like we have radars. We have so much experience with radars. They are so easy to make. We have scenarios. We have pictures of the future. We have so much experience with trend research. So companies can really like say, these tools are all out there and we should treat them serious and build them in our core business processes. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think it's the young people who teach that to us, right? I mean, I think my parents, they would have still expected to go into a large organization and stay there for life. I think in my generation, you know, we sort of thought, okay, we're going to have a good time with a company for some time. But today, my students, they naturally manage all the trends which will influence their employability, and they can easily scale in time horizon, saying, well, my employability in the next 2 years looks great. But then, you know, automation might take over some of the tasks I'm doing today. So I need to get prepared for this as well. So this management in this uncertain space is something which is very unnatural to older generations and very natural, I think, to young generations.
Yeah, it's good news. So education on foresight plays an important role. We need more professors for foresight in the world, I would say. But now this was my last question, Rene. Before we leave the session, we give a big applause for you as the audience, and then I give questions Q&A to the audience. Do you have 10 minutes more time for us to answer some questions from the audience? So first the applause.
Sure.
First the applause. Thank you very much for joining the online expert talk. It was so cool to have you in the virtual studio. Very good discussion. And now please, we have like 200 people in the chat. I see here international people. Stefan Kohn just leaving the session. Stefan, stay here. Daniel, stay here. We have some time now to ask Q&As to Rene, so you can just type in the chat. I will ask Rene, what are your questions, please? They need some time to type because they don't have a voice interface yet.
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing which we will also see much more when you talk about interfaces is that actually we're going to be much more at ease to create through the foresight platforms a real conversation about what we as an organization believe will be happening with this technology, with that technology, and bringing also the personal conversation together to create actually an understanding of when is the tipping point coming, when do we need to go into that market and the other market. I think this is also something where we're going to see a lot of short wiring going on, where earlier it was very long, lengthy processes of collecting data, analyzing data, etc.
Yeah. So everybody says thank you. Great session.
It's also good to hear.
Hands up, applause, icons. We are still at 170 visitors, but I would say now it's your time, online visitors. Usually we would like to have you in the same space and talk to you now, but please take the chance, ask questions. From scenarios to opportunities. This is a good question. I like it very much. Do you have any good examples and a good, maybe also process design, how you can come from scenarios to opportunities, or what we call sometimes maybe innovation fields?
Right. I mean, scenarios are a great tool to make thoughts connect. So for instance, we run a big exercise for looking also into circular economy innovations. And what we did there is that we had very extreme scenarios on how the world would look like, also in terms of regulation, in terms of the perception of how much we need to care about our planet, etc. And there is basically then the setup to make sure that you bring the right people into sessions. And we do this even virtually today. So we open then this virtual whiteboard, we have a Zoom session, and people start off with a core idea of a scenario. And then basically the creativity, the connecting of the different planes of thoughts, of engineers, of marketing people, etc., can unfold in 30 minutes within this virtual space. And you get out and you have a number of product concepts which you can then feed into your Foresight platform, into your AI engine to check, well, which of those are new and which of those can be, reutilized as something where we really put a big budget behind and where we really bet our innovation lies on.
This output of a scenario, would you say it's more like innovation fields, like bigger described fields like future businesses, future markets, or is it more concrete ideas, or can it be both?
It can be both. I mean, it really depends on the design of the sessions and the design of what you want to do afterwards. There's also different interests probably in different organizations. I think what I want just to emphasize here is that today with the technology which we have available, you can make these processes very fast, and people also expect them to be very fast. That also means that you're not trying to, in a session, come, let's say from a first trend drivers to scenarios to then innovations which would work well in this scenario, but you split it up. But these sprints is something where you just come in, you open up your computer, you're connected with 200 other innovators, you put them into breakout sessions and all of that very fast, and then you carry that over to a platform where you then continue to work with the Foresight material which you already have, with the AI engine which looks into big data, and then you innovate what you would do otherwise, often throughout an innovation project which might last 2 or 3 years, in just a couple of very short sessions and within weeks.
Sounds to us that you have good experience in doing scenarios in online tools, to building innovation processes and online workshop facilitation. It sounds like more quick and easy than the old school way, like everybody travels to Berlin, we do a 2-day workshop, we have a big networking and a dinner and 2-day scenario building. This is more comfortable now with online workshops. You see as an advantage in dynamic building of foresight and strategy. Is this the next step also for us to using this online workshop tools? Huh?
I believe so. I mean, we have experienced this for a long time in online teaching. Here at my EDHEC business school, we have even an entire business unit which does that, 100% online teaching. And it's a lot of these professionals who say, I have also my job to follow. I would like to have a new degree, but I need to have that brought to me, and I need to be able to do that asynchronous when I have the time, not when the teacher has the time. And I think this is therefore something which more and more people get used to and will be used much more. And the tools are there. It's more a matter of then putting enough effort in preparing all this, because you can also not just come into a room and say something good will happen here, everyone get a pen and a post-it. You need to really have structured the thinking process. And once you have done that, indeed, it becomes even more efficient than sitting in this room and somebody with a bad handwriting wrote this little post-it which I can't read and so on.
So there should be a good master of ceremony really guiding through the process. And maybe one more advantage is that you can invite like hundreds of people. Usually you really think about in the scenario workshop, Berlin, everybody flies in, 20 people max, core team. But now you can say, no, let's open up. Let's have 200 people, you just said, and invite them and external experts, so on. It's many advantages. Really sounds good. And online tools for collaborative innovation. There is one more question from Mareike in the chat, and she asked, how can you measure success of corporate foresight?
Well, I mean, we do care actually for this long measurement between the foresight capability measured with our maturity model and then the firm performance. There's of course a lot of intermediate steps there which you can also measure. So when we are asked to help building up corporate foresight capabilities, it would be a bit sad to say, well, we build this today, you pay the bill today, and in 7 years' time you have the outcome, right? So the main thing is really to make sure that early on you can bring this information to either filter through your portfolios and say, well, these projects we can really stop now because there's no future for them. That creates value. And there's also value to be had when you're enhance simply the innovation work of others, that you come in as a challenger, a bit like Steve Jobs, coming in as a challenger to his technology teams all the time and saying, I still don't get it. It needs to be even easier to use, etc. But this in a more structured way with foresight of saying, other products, they're already thinking about these features. Can we also include that? And then there's also a lot of value actually in creating these opinions about where do we see this innovation, this technology from our point of view maturing and being ready for the market, etc. So creating these communities and maybe even enhance that with little Delphi studies so that you can come quickly to decisions which then create value.
Right. We still have more than 140 visitors, so if you don't mind, I would continue to the third question. I hope you have some more time before you jump in the next lecture. There's one more question from Hanne, and she asked, could you elaborate a little bit more on AI for foresight? Because we all believe this could be the next big thing in foresight, because it has so much to do with data, qualitative data, quantitative data, insight data, trend database data, startup database, patent data. So also sometimes when I do the foresight work, my mind explodes because I think there are so many sources, so many different views on the future. Also patents is like crazy to really get a clear picture of what's happening in this field. And of course there are some good tools, but there are also consumer insight tools and trend database and startup tools. How do you see the role of AI in foresight, let's say maybe for the next 10 years? It's always an easy question because in 10 years, everything can happen, right? But yeah, what is your opinion, AI in foresight?
Well, we run actually a summit with leading experts from industry and from tool designers and tool providers last year. And I was surprised how bullish actually everyone was. Because I've been also working for many years with researchers on artificial intelligence, and there is sort of the perception in the industry that tomorrow we're going to have pattern recognition. I'm just going to sit as an innovator in my dashboard and let the machine basically spur out the innovations. There I would be saying careful. However, what we see now as a huge opportunity is that once you have an understanding that there could be some potential there, you can use sort of algorithms which search in all kinds of databases and validate concepts very early. Once you have validated a concept, you can also throw that concept out with a description, and the tool will bring you back more information about startups who work on something similar. And you would still need a human operator to go through some of those results, but you're not starting from scratch. You can scale this across the globe, even with different languages and so on, which you would first need to acquire if you would want to do that as a manual task. And what we also see is that a lot of this sort of automation in innovation management is not just creating speed, but it's creating the opportunity to then, for the human operator, so to speak, reach even into other fields which you otherwise would simply not go. Getting inspiration from different industries is maybe for many a standard, but going to completely different domains is something which then becomes much more feasible.
Yeah, we can really manage this VUCA, fast-changing, global, cross-industry thing. Maybe not only with our human brains, right? We need machines processing big data and giving us a clearer picture, managing all the sources, bringing together on good cockpits, even like technology platforms, management dashboards. Very good, yeah. There is one question, maybe it's the last question, I really like from Daniel from Munich. And he asks, how can you raise awareness for foresight in Corona times? Because now, as we said, the management has like much more important things to do. They don't have time to talk to crazy foresight people. Don't come talk to me about 10 years. I mean, now it's really serious. We have to manage the crisis. Maybe we didn't even get our workplace running in VPN and remote work. Maybe we are still managing the lack of revenues. We don't have so much time to think ahead, but I think this could be the third wave to see Corona also brings a lot of power and innovation speed. I sometimes say Corona is like a catalyst for change and innovation and digitalization. So you can say COVID is like catalyst or giving orientation, vitality for innovation and digitalization. This is COVID. But what would you say, because I don't work so much with top management, what would you say, how can you raise awareness for top management now, in these times?
I think it doesn't need to be raised that much further. It's more the question of how to actually work with it. I mean, I'm having a lot of discussions with firms who say, well, you know, I've been always saying this, we should do more foresight, we should work with more scenarios to have more robust strategies. And also this pandemic has been in almost any scenario project you can find, it has been a scenario, right? So nobody's surprised about this on the big level, but then nobody was prepared either, right? So I think for many firms, the puzzle is not whether I should do something on foresight. Many say, yes, we need to do it, and we have been doing it, and we're doing it now. The question is how to really channel this. And what we emphasize there is that you really need to separate the planning teams now. You need a planning team which deals with the operational challenges which you have right now. Closing this factory, can I have sanitary barriers? Yes or no? How does it work? What's also the planning of production? How many people do I need? What do I do with the others, etc., etc. But then you need this midterm horizon where you say, okay, well, when we come out of this, what will be then the sort of new normal? How do we going to operate there? And for instance, we're working on a project in the airline industry. There's a lot of questions. How do we make sure that we even go beyond 20% of pre-corona passenger capacities in the different steps of the value chain? And then, of course, what excites us most is to go to a horizon 3, saying what is actually the new options on the table? What is the new option on virtual traveling? I know we had a conversation about that, Nils, on the future of virtual traveling. What does it mean for others? Why do they like that? And I think this is really the key to then also unlock the full potential of foresight.
Daniel, maybe to add on this, because I did 50 interviews in the last 3 weeks about like innovation in terms of crisis now. And I learned from some companies that they use foresight and innovation, especially now, to be more successful than the competitor because they know the competition is struggling. And also the clients are very open for digital access. Doesn't matter if you have B2C or B2B clients, they are very open for new digitalizations, new ways of communication, creating a holistic customer journey, and all this. They are all very aware now on new business models, new tools, new things to work with you. So maybe to convince the top management, it's now a good time to say, okay, when we can win now. Now is the best time to win the trust of our clients and also of our suppliers and partners, because as we show, we as a company now really think ahead, be positive, be progressive, then we really show we are a good, positive company. And the other way around, if we say, no, now is not the time for innovation, is not the time for customer success and centricity, and so on, then we really show we are not stable. We as soon there is a small crisis, we forget about innovation in our company and in marketing. And Peter Drucker, Peter Drucker already said, like maybe 100 years ago, the two core functions of a company are marketing and innovation. There's nothing else. It's not about production. This is not your competitive advantage. Everybody can do production somewhere. But the two core basic functions of a company are marketing and innovation. So bringing something new to the market, that's it. And this is a good time to do it now. Rene, I don't know. We are now 3 minutes before 11, so I would say that's it. It was a very good session with you. I liked it so much, the setup, and I really appreciate that you came into our virtual room. We also have a distance because you are like, well, I know, 600 kilometers away. Just looks like we don't have Corona distance, but we have, right? 600 kilometers is a good Corona distance. So maybe there comes a computer virus now through the internet and infects me and you, but it could not be a bio virus because so far we cannot scan and fax bioviruses through the internet. I don't know. Maybe, yeah, we can have this already. So take care, Rene. Stay healthy, and thanks for joining. Thanks to all the online participants who joining our session. You can find much more on this download links and QR code links, and or you just write us an email. I show you again Rene's email address here. I think I have it here, rene.rohrbeck@edhec.edu education, and yeah, looking forward meeting you. Let's say bye bye, Rene. Maybe you can shake hands again. Bye bye, Rene. All the best. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you, everyone.